South Africa matters so much. It matters to the continent and to the world. It matters to those of us who understand that the growth in GDP that we're seeing in other parts of the continent that we're all celebrating can only be sustained if South Africa makes progress. South Africa is 55 million people, which represents 5.5% of the African population, contributes $360 billion economically, or roughly about 20 to 25% of the GDP in sub-Saharan Africa. Foreign direct investment to Africa is about $55 billion per year, and South Africa garners $7 billion of that, or roughly 13% of the total. South Africa's financial services sector is backed by a sound regulatory and legal framework. I don't have to tell you all that. It's sophisticated, boasting dozens of domestic and foreign institutions, providing a full range of services: commercial, retail, merchant banking, mortgage lending, insurance, and investment. Simply put, Africa simply, absolutely, positively cannot succeed if South Africa isn't succeeding. It's really important to remember. I think everybody here gets that, but when I talk to policy leaders in Foggy Bottom in our State Department, when I talk to my friends at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, when I talk to academics in America, they're fascinated by things that are happening in other kinetic points on the continent, and they're happy to celebrate some of the growth rates they see, not appreciating that those growth rates are from a very low foundation and don't have the ability to have the outsized impact that a humming, well-working South Africa can have on futures here. So it's always important to remind my American friends of that. So simply put, rest can't succeed if South Africa doesn't succeed. That's not to say that South Africa's success will guarantee Africa's prosperity, but it certainly seems to be a necessary condition of that progress, especially at a time when we all need to remember that despite all the gains that have been made, right now, today, Africa has a collective GDP that's only the equal of France, right? Really, really important to have that perspective. South Africa also, and most especially, matters to all of us who have a continued fealty for justice and equality in this spinning globe. South Africa will long occupy a special place in our political imaginations with a history that compels all of us to expand our moral imaginations. That's important for the rest of the continent, and that's going to have an impact on income and growth as well. But what I told audiences in the United States, and what I'd like to say to my friends here in South Africa, is that this incredible, great experiment will collapse under the weight of its own myths if economic malaise is allowed to deepen. It's this tension that acts, I think, as our urgent convener this morning. That's another thing that I had to reinforce to my American friends, because like me, there's a tendency to sometimes have an overly romanticized notion of South Africa and where it's at in its politics today. And it's really important to remind my friends in the U.S. that change happens all sorts of ways, and sometimes it's change for the good, and sometimes it's change that can get in the way of growth. I felt compelled to contextualize one thing in particular to my American audience, and it's the issue that you can't really understand growth in South Africa, you can't really understand the economy, the investment environment in South Africa, if you don't wrap your brain around the question of transformation. Most of my friends in the U.S. don't quite know what that means in this context. Well, too many of them don't know what it means in the American context either. But you really can't have the conversation about South Africa without discussing what transformation means. And I will tell my friends here in this room that something that's troubled me greatly in the last few years here in South Africa is this one regressive trend. Over the past few years, the percentage of black CEOs in top firms in South Africa has gone from 15% when I first arrived to down to somewhere in the neighborhood of 10%. And across the board, if you look at the top 40 companies in the country, and if you look at the 350 senior leaders in those top 40 companies, you will see that black South Africans comprise less than 19% of that leadership body. So I think all must be concerned about what that means in an economy where 75% of economic activity is generated by black South Africans. But they have that kind of paucity of representation in the corporate boardroom and in middle and senior leadership positions.